Hi, everyone. I'm Ilana Varro. I'm here with Dr. Anita Johnston on the Sacred Self-Worth interview series. And today we're going to be talking about body image, self-worth, the psychological perspective, and just how really connecting to ourselves improves our lives, improves our health, mental health. Um, could you give us a little intro to who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm a psychologist and I've been working in the field of women's issues and eating difficulties for over 35 years. It's what I really love. I wrote Eating in the Light of the Moon, and I have an online platform. It's sort of like a workbook for Eating in the Light of the Moon. It's interactive courses called the Light of the Moon Cafe. And then I do a lot of speaking, and I do soul hunger workshops around the country.
Wow.
I'm the clinical director of Ipono, Hawaii, which is a residential facility for eating disorders on Maui. And then we have outpatient programs on the Big Island of Hawaii and Oahu. And I just do a lot of things, a
Yeah,
lot of different things.
sure do. And would you say self-worth is a topic that comes up for you in your work?
I think it's inescapable.
Yeah.
That really, when you get to the root of what the difficulties are with and struggles with eating, you're going to find issues around self-worth. But
Mm.
the cool thing is, and most people don't realize this, but the recovery journey from disordered eating or an eating disorder or whatever someone might be doing in terms of their struggle with food and body image is actually a path to self-worth.
Mm. And I saw, a little bit before when we were talking and preparing for this interview that was something that, you were going to talk about. And I just love that perspective. So I want to hear more about how the struggle and the difficulties actually leads you to this beautiful place.
Well, I guess it's because after all these years of working in the field, I've stopped believing in such a thing as eating disorders. Now, that doesn't mean I don't recognize that there are very serious eating disorders and that need to be addressed. But what I discovered is that if you zoom the lens way out with whatever the eating difficulty is, you're going to find certain patterns. And these patterns reveal themselves throughout someone's life. So, for example, if somebody is restricting their food, that's not the only thing they're restricting. They're restricting new experiences, they're restricting their emotions, and they're restricting their sexuality, and they're putting themselves on restriction. They make a mistake. So you're going to find this theme of restriction everywhere in their lives. And if somebody is struggling with binge eating or yo-yo dieting or whatever the issue is on that end of the spectrum, you're going to find the theme of scarcity everywhere. So it's not just there's not enough food, but there's not enough money, there's not enough time, there's not enough attention. So this not enough, or sometimes it plays out as I'm not enough. That's the theme that you can start to see in many areas. And someone who struggles with bulimia or going through periods of time of restricting, then binging, and back and forth, you're going to find this propensity to take on too much, more than they can digest, whether it's classes, and then they get overwhelmed and they drop out of school, or too many projects, and then it's like, oh, I've had it, and they go to bed, or maybe they meet someone and fall madly in love, and then that the slightest thing that goes wrong, I'm out of here, I'm over this. So you'll see this tendency to take on too much and then not be able to feel like they can handle it, and there's something wrong with them for that. And so that's what I started seeing, is that, okay, the good news is as you address this pattern in the struggle with eating or body image, it also resolves itself in other areas. And as you address it in other areas, it helps to resolve it with the eating difficulties. And so that's how it becomes a path, a path to connecting to true self.
I love that. I love that. What, and this might be the answer to this question, but what is your definition of self-worth? What does that mean to you? Is it just what you said, finding your true self? Is there
Well,
more?
it's finding your true self, but also I think a big part of it, and I think this is fundamental on the recovery journey, is what I call compassionate curiosity. Because you see, you bring in compassionate curiosity, then that pushes that critical judgment out of the room. So it's sort of like, when you walk into a dark room, you don't push the darkness out, you turn on a light. And so it is if you bring in compassionate curiosity and ask yourself questions with a totally different tone. So instead of going, why they do that, if you say, I wonder why I did that. So it's a very different tone, and it's the same as like if you're talking to a child, if you say to them, "Why'd you do that?" You're not going to get an honest answer.
Yeah.
You're going to get their best defense, right? But if you said it with passionate curiosity, "Oh, why'd you do that?" The answer you get will astound you. And so it is when you start talking to yourself like that, you connect with yourself in a way that elevates your sense of self.
I love that. I love that. What happens when someone says, I'm not worthy of compassionate curiosity? I deserve the harsh, the darkness.
I would bring compassion and curiosity to that as well. And I would say, oh, when did you get that idea? Were you born like that when you were a little kid and you were just kind of rolling around? Did you have this belief that you weren't worthy? And then, so you start to just explore, where did it come from? Did it just drop out of the sky? And so again, getting curious about that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think that's perfect. There's not even a follow-up question to that, because I think that it always comes back to getting curious.
And it's the same with eating difficulties. So a lot of people who struggle, they get very angry with themselves, and they say things like, well, I should have known better, or, I failed again on this diet. And of course, they don't know that diets are designed to fail. That's what all the research shows is no, diets have built-in failure into them, because they create a state of deprivation and they diminish your self-esteem. And so then it's a vicious circle, because then you go, oh, okay, I know what's wrong with me. It's my body. And if I just lose weight, then I'll feel good. And so I think when you can get off of that and again become very curious about, for example, the foods that you might eat when you're not hungry, or the foods that you might not allow yourself to eat when you're hungry, or that if you get curious, what happens is a whole new world opens up, and you enter the world of metaphor and symbolism, where you can discover that there's a part of you, and often I call it the higher self, a much larger part of you than exists even in this third dimensional reality. And it has information for you about what your true desires are, what you really want. But because that part can't speak to us like in English, it uses the word of metaphor. And for many of us, it uses the foods we crave or fear to communicate to us what our greatest heart's desires are. But it's coded, so we don't quite read it properly, and we think that, oh, I want that chocolate cake, even if I'm not hungry, without really looking at what the chocolate cake really means to them and what it symbolizes. Because once you can dig into that, then you can really feed yourself what it is you truly want.
Yeah, I love.
And sometimes it may just be the chocolate cake, but if you're not hungry and you're eating the chocolate cake, or you don't allow yourself to have chocolate cake, when there's energy behind it, then there's also meaning to be found.
Yeah. What meaning do you find is associated with, let's say, the sweet, rich kind of foods?
Mm-hmm. Well, typically the way you crack, and everyone's different, of course, but for most of us, sweet foods usually have to do with either feeling like there's not enough sweetness in our life, or that we're not sweet enough. And crunchy, salty foods are typically connected to unexpressed anger and frustration. And a craving for soups or stews is usually associated with emotional warmth. And spicy foods for a desire or a fear, it can go either way, of excitement, stimulation, and change. And chocolate, come on, we know this from Valentine's Day, right? Sex and romance. And so you begin with this. You begin to look at the foods with your inner eye and listen to what they're saying with your inner ear, and a whole new world opens up. And just in case your listeners are they don't have to scribble this down, I have a free gift that spells all of this out, and so they can check that out.
Yes, that's beautiful. I saw that and I was very excited. It's very illuminating, and like you said, it's different for everyone, but it provides information for you to get curious about and with. So,
and it also can be a lot of fun. So recovery from an eating disorder, or trying to break free from, yo-yo dieting. Sometimes it feels like a lot of hard work, like you're crawling over cut glass on bare knees.
yeah.
But when you can start to that there's meaning in it, and you start to crack this code and decipher what that meaning might be, it even is fun. And so a lot of people don't realize that, but there's a great deal of joy when you have these aha moments, and you start to see beyond what the struggle is, and honestly connect with your true self. And there's a lot of joy in that when you can do that.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to have people like you that guide through this process, because yes, the aha can be really fun, and it can also be frightening, right? Like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this now? So
right.
Yeah.
But there's this saying, it's a Zen saying, don't stop looking at the finger pointing to the moon. Look at the moon. And so what happens is, so many of us get stuck at the finger level, kind of like a dog, looking to see, is there a treat there? I mean, dogs don't understand symbolic language, but when you understand symbolic language, you can start to see that whatever it is you're struggling with is pointing you towards something. And in my experience, that something is usually really beautiful, but you have to keep your gaze going, looking past that to see what pointing you towards. What is it that it's directing towards? And I think it is directing you towards the value of your true self, who you really are.
And what shifts when someone steps into their true self and who they really are?
Well, everything shifts. I think when you start to live your life from your authentic self, it's easier to make decisions. How close you want to get to other people in your lives becomes a lot clearer. You get very clear, because if you're staying connected to your true self, then you're in communication with a part of you that can guide you. And this part of you is benevolent and has your best interests at heart. And so, this is the voice that will let you know when you're feeling upset about the size of your thighs or your butt or whatever. This is the voice that will say, that's not who you are. Your worth is not determined by the size of your thighs or your butt. So we all have that voice, but many of us spent many years disregarding and not listening. And so it's really a matter of really attuning to that, and everything in your life shifts.
Yeah. What do you see tends to bring up noise so that we stop listening to that? Because I imagine when we're born, we have that connection, right? We have a better connection to ourselves, our bodies, our hunger, fullness. So what is the noise that starts to get in our head?
The noise is what I call the nonsense of the culture. And there's a lot of nonsense out there. And in my experience, certainly people that struggle with eating difficulties are very emotionally sensitive and highly intuitive. So that means, their antenna for this noise is exquisite, and they pick up on it. But the problem lies then in how they interpret what they're picking up on. So that what happens is that, he's angry, I must have done something wrong. Or she can't get that together. Maybe I didn't help her enough. There must be something wrong with me. So what happens in the interpretation of what someone is doing when they pick up on that noise is they think that it's because when it's unpleasant, it's their fault. It's because something is wrong with them. And I remember having this thought when I was raising my two daughters. They're now gorgeous grown women, but I remember realizing, oh, they have to develop a skill that I didn't have to develop. I grew up on a small island of Guam in the 1950s and 60s. And so there wasn't a whole lot going on. And I didn't have to develop what I call omitteracy, which is the ability to omit that nonsense.
Huh.
I grew up with, television was one station, black and white. Who was interested in that? And there weren't many magazines and not even that many movies. And there certainly, of course, wasn't, the internet. So I had less that I had to block out as I was growing up. But certainly, as time goes on, even now, I have to be able to block out some of that so that I can tune into my own inner resources and tell the difference between the voice that is the voice of my true self and the voice that comes from conditioning from the nonsense of the culture. And there's a lot of that. And you really need to learn what is the difference.
Yeah. Is there a specific, I love the term, the nonsense of the culture. I love it. Is there a specific part of the culture or aspect that is more nonsensical than others? Is there a specific part that you're just like, for example, like Instagram or TV shows, like, is there one particular area or part of culture that you feel is like very, it undoes our connection to ourselves?
Well, I think there's toxic parts to all aspects. And again, that's where connecting to your true self helps you weed that out. It's really a matter of, I guess, tuning into what I would call the energetic signature. So how does something feel? A posting, I have found postings on Facebook a lot of times can be really positive. I've learned a lot from advocates on Facebook, and at the same time, there's a lot of postings that are very negative, and there's really one way to sort it down, and I think that is if whatever it is that comes from the media gives you this feeling of expansion and a lightness and a feeling of harmony. Even if it's angry, you can really feel that it is based more on love than on fear. Once you learn how to read that, that's how you start to discern what to take in and what to say, not for me, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. Are there certain practices? I assume people are listening like, okay, that sounds great. I want to, be more connected and listen to myself. How do I do that?
Well, of course, there's always meditation where you block out all the nonsense and you tune in. And then you only get to listen to your own nonsense, which is there too, because we internalize all of that, and then learn how to let that go as well. But I think there are, I talk to myself all the time. So for example, if I'm dealing with, okay, here's some of the nonsense from the culture that'll come in. So let's say I'm getting ready to go on a trip. And I'm going to be giving a talk. This happened not too long ago on body image. And I'm going through the checkout line in the store, buying my little toothpastes and my little shampoos and all of that. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw this magazine that had the body of a beautiful, young, airbrushed body in a bikini. Now, what popped up in my head, which is the nonsense of the culture that I had internalized, was, oh, I wish I had a body like that. Now, what I know is when that pops up, I need to be ready for that. And I need to talk back to that voice. So I have a whole set of other voices. And so another voice comes up and says, well, Anita, you used to have a belly like that a long time ago when you were really young. And how did you like your body then? And I went, oh, I didn't like it too much then. I was so critical of myself. I thought, I had too many zits and my butt was too big and I was too flat. So, but that voice doesn't stop because the enculturated voice is strong. And so it said, well, I'd really appreciate that body if I had it now. And so the other voice says, well, you carried and birthed two beautiful children. Would you trade them for that kind of belly? And so, of course, the answer is no. But that voice doesn't stop. It says, well, just think of all the cool clothes that I could wear if I had a body like that. And so then I have to bring in the big guns, and that's the voice that says, Anita, how would your 80-year-old self like the body you have now? She'd like it very much. So what I'm trying to say is, in situations like that, it's always a dialogue, never a monologue. So when the mean voice, and we all have the mean voice inside of us, when that voice steps up, you need to respond to it, not by fighting back, but by responding with the truth of what really matters, what you really value. So that's one example. There's just, I think we have to be vigilant, but that doesn't mean we have to be running around like scared rabbits, but you have to be ready. Billions and billions of dollars have been put into lots of nonsense because it gets us to feel bad about ourselves. So we'll spend money on this product or that product, and that's just the way it is. For whatever reason, we're born on the planet at this time, and we just need to learn how to respond to it. Well, what I found is that consciousness will always win out.
Yeah. And can you say a little more about that?
Well, being aware of what's going on inside of you and outside of you, and being in witness to that. So it's a little tricky because you're participating and you're witnessing at the same time. So I'm buying these items. I'm going through the checkout line. Now I'm still paying for my things. I'm aware of that, but I'm also aware of what pops up in my head. And I'm also aware of that this is cultural conditioning. It doesn't have any connection to reality. And at the same time, I'm responding to it. So that's this kind of acute awareness, moment to moment to moment, of what's going on inside of you and outside of you, all at the same time.
Yeah, I love that. That makes sense. Is there any other practice that you like aside from consciousness awareness, mindful meditation?
Yeah, well, of course, I work with folks who struggle with eating issues.
Yeah.
So that's a great way. If you're aware that you're craving a particular food, and you've already learned how to read your body signals and know that there's no physical hunger, then boom, that's a signal that there's another kind of hunger going on, and you get curious about it. What might that be? So that's how you start sorting it through.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that attending to, with kindness, whatever is going on in your life, that's a path out of the struggle.
Yeah. Are there certain practices of kindness that you prefer?
Well, for example, if someone has a lot of judgments about themselves, one thing I suggest is pay attention to them. Don't fight with them. Notice them when they come up. And then let's say you screwed something up and you're beating yourself up over it. Push the pause button and say, all right, what would I say to my very best friend if she made this mistake? Or what would I say to my niece or my daughter or somebody who, if they made this mistake? Well, I say this, and most people know how to be kind. And so all you do is you listen to what you would say, and then you let go. And then you wait for the next judgment. And when you hear that, you imagine, because this is imagination used in service of self-worth, right? Worry is a misuse of good imagination. I tell that to people when they say, I don't have imagination. It's like, whoa, we usually do.
Good point.
But so you just listen for these judgments, imagine what you would say to someone you really care about, and you let it go. And after a while, there's fewer and fewer judgments that keep popping up. They're kind of like weeds, it's like they'll keep coming, but not as much if you stay on top of it. Yeah. So I think, that's another technique of just of paying attention.
Yeah. And that's a good point that, no matter how far along you go on your journey, even for you who, you do this for for so long, and you still notice like, oh, this just popped up, this conditioned thing, so I think that's important for people to hear, that this isn't something that you just kind of come to terms with and it's over and done, never bothers you again.
No, it's like body image. So I remember I do these retreats called Tending the Feminine Psyche with Francie White and Carolyn Costin, and we train other professionals who work with people with eating difficulties. And a lot of the times, about 50% are professionals who have had their own recovery experience. And I'll never forget, this woman said, I worked really hard to clear my eating disorder, and I did. And I went back to school, and I trained, became a dietitian, and then I started dealing with body image. And now there's aging. That's right, folks. It never ends. But it doesn't always have to be a struggle. So you might as well develop what I call tools for dealing when these pop up in your life, because they're going to.
Yeah.
It's like waves in the ocean. If you don't know how to ride a wave, it can be really terrible. But if you know how, it's like, oh, okay, I can turn around, I can catch this, and I can ride it, and oh yeah, there's another one, and oh yeah, there's another one. Yeah. After a while, it even gets to be fun, and then you develop the wisdom that says, oh, okay, I'm not getting in the water now, but that doesn't mean you're going to stay out of the water forever.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like life.
Yeah. And to go with that metaphor, I'm also hearing, or where my mind goes is, we often see people surfing the wave, and we forget that they have fallen hundreds of times to get to that point. So, it's like, maybe I don't want to even get in the water because I'm not surfing, but I forget that, oh wait, I have to get pummeled by the waves a couple times, and maybe get someone to teach me, hold my hand through the process. It's not just some people know how to surf and some people don't. It's a process.
Well, I think that's the case with all of these skills, whether it's riding a bike or driving a car or learning how to swim. What they do take practice. You don't get them by reading a book or watching somebody else or having just the perfect DNA. So I think that's really helpful for people to understand that there are skills, and there's a metaphor that I use it over and over again because it's everybody's favorite metaphor, and I get emails from people like all over the world that say, oh, this helped me look at things differently. And it's a metaphor for someone struggling with disordered eating, but it can work for, any kind of struggle. And again, with these things, you use your imagination. So imagine you're on the banks of a raging river. It's pouring down rain, you slip and you fall in and you're drowning. You're getting pulled down through the rapids, and along comes a big log, and you grab on, and the log saves your life. It keeps your head above water when surely you would have gone down. And eventually it carries you to a place where the river is calm. And from there you see the riverbanks, but you can't get there because of the log. So the irony is the very thing that saved your life is now getting in the way of you going where you want to go in life. Yeah. And it's important to understand that. It's important to realize we do things not because we're stupid or broken or damaged in some ways, but because we were drowning in some strong emotional currents and we just grabbed on. Yeah. And of course, to make it more complicated, there's always somebody yelling, let go of the log, let go of the log. And you feel like an absolute idiot because you can't let go. Well, the way I see it is that letting go of the log might not be the very best thing to do initially, because what happens if you start to swim to shore, get halfway there, realize you don't have the strength and confidence to make it? That means you don't have the strength to make it back to the log either, and you're really sunk. Mm-hmm. So we have a wise part of our being that will not let us let go of anything until we're good and ready. So what do you do instead? Well, let go of the log and try floating. And when you start to sink, grab on. Then you let go of the log and you try treading water. And when you get tired, you grab back on. Then you let go of the log and you swim around it once, grab back on. Twice, grab back on. 10 times, 100 times, 200 times, until you have the strength and confidence to let go of the log. Yeah. Then you let go because it has no function any longer. And I think that's why it's important to really understand what the function is of our struggles, because that's going to point us towards what the skill set is we need to develop in order to let go, because we're not going to let go until then.
Yeah. That is absolutely my favorite metaphor too of yours. I have repeated it to, everyone I work with, friends, family. It's such a great, it conceptually gets the point so clearly. And it's so, so true. How can people find you if they want to come to some of your events, online, social media? How can people get a hold of you?
Okay, well, they can find me at my website, dranitajohnston.com. It's Johnston with a T. Or lightofthemooncafe.com. I have a bunch of interactive courses and self-study courses at the cafe where I help women work with disordered eating of all sorts. I do individual consultations, which you can find me on, again, my website. And I do soul hunger workshops. In fact, I'm getting ready to head off to one in a couple of days in Atlanta, and I do them all around the country, so they're posted on my site, or you can just hop on my mailing list and I can let you know if I'm going to be in your neck of the woods.
Awesome, awesome. And just for the audience, this is the book, A Good Place to Start, Eating in the Light of the Moon, and it's awesome. And thank you so much. Do you have Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff also?
Yes, I've got Anita Johnston on Facebook and Light of the Moon Cafe also on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. And just a reminder to everyone, there will be a link to that gift that Anita was talking about with the correlations of food and the metaphorical connections of what the deeper.
Yeah, how to look at your foods with a different eye so you can find out what they might really mean.
Yes, awesome. Dr. Anita Johnston, thank you so, so much for being a part of this. It's been an honor to connect with you and meet you virtually. I'm a big fan of your work, so thank you so much for being a part of this.
My pleasure.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.